And joining us right now is royal commentator and royal historian, Dr. Carolyn Harris. Dr. Harris, good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So listen, I'm going to take a moment, though, to recognize the fact, just to brag at just how great our guest is. You're actually wearing a King Charles III medal. You know your topic so well. You've been recognized by the King himself.
Yes, I received this medal at a ceremony at Queen's Park on the second anniversary of the coronation earlier this month from Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, Edith Dumont, on behalf of King Charles III. So it's a tremendous honor. The other people at the ceremony, there were First Nations leaders and artists and community leaders and all sorts of incredible people.
Incredible people, as you say, and for our purposes, proves the fact that you come with great credentials to talk about the King's visit to Ottawa. But,
thank you.
So here he is, invited by the Prime Minister to read the throne speech tomorrow. Now, part of this has to do with Donald Trump and how Donald Trump essentially mocked Canada's sovereignty, mocked Canada's Prime Minister. How does the King's presence, reading the throne speech tomorrow, assert Canadian nationalism?
Well, the King, as head of state, is the personification of the state. And by coming to Canada on the advice of Prime Minister Mark Carney to read the throne speech, he is showcasing Canada's distinctive political history and traditions that are very different from American political traditions. When the American Revolution took place and the United States broke away from the Crown, thousands of loyalists settled in Canada. And it's interesting to see in the 19th century, in the early 20th century, loyalty to the Crown was something that made Canada distinct from the United States. And we're now seeing another historical moment when there's a very strong focus on what makes Canada different from the United States. So the monarchy, which many people thought was gradually fading in significance for many Canadians, is now receiving fresh attention as this distinctive aspect of Canadian history and politics.
Well, fresh attention, as you say, and as we can see from the video right now, thousands of people coming out to greet the King, which was no certainty that would happen, but that is what we witnessed as we take a look at some of the visuals from Lansdowne Park in Ottawa earlier this afternoon. But I have to note the fact that the King and Buckingham Palace was criticized back in February because of the meeting that Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, had with Donald Trump. He hand-delivered to him an invitation from the King to meet him at Balmoral, and Canadians were looking for the King, for the sovereign, to stand up for this country as King of Canada. How difficult has this all been for Buckingham Palace, do you think?
Well, King Charles III's in a very difficult diplomatic situation because he is King of the United Kingdom, King of Canada, King of 13 other Commonwealth realms that all have their own histories and their own foreign policy and are all trying to navigate the uncertain situation in the United States. So in his capacity as King of the United Kingdom, King Charles III took the advice of his British Prime Minister and issued that invitation for a state visit, as Prime Minister Keir Starmer is very focused on harmonious trade relations with the United States. But in his capacity as King of Canada, King Charles III accepted an invitation from Prime Minister Carney to open Parliament here in Canada. So we're seeing these two very distinctive roles, King of the United Kingdom and King of Canada. And all of the events today showcase King Charles III in his capacity as King of Canada.
King of Canada, although I think it's fair to say there are questions as to whether, or rather questions as to how important Canada is to the King. What would you say to that?
Well, King Charles III has a very long relationship with Canada that goes back to 1970 when he visited in another delicate political situation. It was the Cold War. The United States was wondering about Canadian sovereignty over the Arctic, which was quite sparsely populated at that time. So Prince Charles, as he then was, Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Philip, Princess Anne, all visited for the 100th anniversary of the Northwest Territories. And they didn't simply visit Yellowknife, which had received a royal visit before, but they went to Tuktoyaktuk, they went to Iqaluit, and all of the world's press were therefore focused on the Arctic Circle, the royal visit, everything from the Inuit delegations greeting them to the fashions of the tour that had to be suited to some of these remote areas. So the amount of press coverage of that royal tour had a way of subtly affirming Canada's sovereignty in the Arctic because of this very high-profile royal visit. And we noticed that Prince Charles spent a lot of time in the Arctic in the 1970s. He even went under ice diving in 1975. So King Charles III, as Prince of Wales, has traveled quite extensively in Canada, and it's clear it's not simply in official capacity that he really has enjoyed hiking, skiing, and even under ice diving, that Canada's landscapes have really spoken to him.
And to that, this is in fact the King's 20th visit, his first as King, but
Yes.
20th visit to Canada as a member of the royal family. Listen, very quickly, running out of time, what do you hope comes out of this royal visit? Given this moment in Canadian nationalism, what do you hope comes out of this, very quickly?
I hope that what comes out of this is a renewed understanding of King Charles III's role as King of Canada, and there being a greater interest generally in Canada's history and Westminster political system.
Well, Dr. Carolyn Harris, as I said, no better guest to speak about this today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.